Okay, time to get down to business. We're in the home stretch, another big day in front of us, and we have a great speaker leading us off from the Air Staff, Lieutenant General Bill Bender. He's the Chief of Information Dominance, and he's the Chief Information Officer for the Air Staff. He's the one who's in charge of all this stuff when we start worrying about cyber and who's doing what. He's got 3 different directorates, and he supports some 54,000 cyber operations around the world. His portfolio in his area is worth over $17 billion alone. And as you know, that's probably the most dynamic and most growing area of interest in our Department of Defense. He's been a true mobility guy. He's been around all over air mobility. He's also he's had an assignment to United States European Command. He's been in Headquarters Air Force before. He was the commander of our Air Force Expeditionary Center. And he was up there at Grand Forks with Mr. John Marshall, who we honored on Thursday night as the wing commander. So I'd ask you to please welcome not only a great officer, but a graduate and an alumni of the great school of Manhattan College, where I too hail from. Bill, welcome.
General Light, I was wondering whether you were going to mention that, because I certainly was if you didn't. We used to see each other when we were both at Scott Air Force Base together, and he would always remind me that he was the highest-ranking Yankees fan in the world. And so I have since supplanted him because I've added on active duty to that. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished leaders throughout, I'm really, really pleased to have this opportunity to be here today, to come out of Washington, D.C., and I know typically that gets a little bit of a chuckle because anybody who gets to get out of Washington, D.C., we've heard that time and again, and I thought worthy of just telling you how it really works, because it's not just an opportunity to get out, it's become a competition among those of us who hold what's called the Deputy Chief of Staff positions, but all of your functionals across the Air Force, A1, A2, so personnel, intelligence, operations, and so on and so forth. And, you know, we're always looking for an opportunity to come out and to visit with a crowd like this because it allows us to talk about what's going on strategically at the Air Force headquarters. Let me tell you a little bit how it happened that I got to be here today, because I think it helps understand where we're at the Air Staff. Initially, the committee comes together some number of months ago and decides how they want to flesh out the agenda and who they would like to have come and speak. And it usually starts with, well, who are we going to bring in from the Air Staff? And they think in terms of what's the most important functional area that's out there. And so they make a call and they ask, and unfortunately they were denied, the person wasn't available. And so then they call again after re-meeting and reconvening, and they come out and they say, okay, who's the best public speaker? We're getting desperate here. And again, they were denied. And finally, it gets down to this emergency meeting, and General Light calls me in really very, very concerned, and he says, Bill, we need the best looking officer on the Air Staff to come in and speak to us. And of course, I immediately accepted. I just didn't feel right about turning them down a third time. So, General, I thank you. Thanks for having me, and for General Cassidy, General Fogelman, General McDew, and General Everhart, it's great to have you here as well and to be a part of this team for this weekend. I've got a fairly serious topic. I mean, everybody who has spoken to you has spent some time broadly moving us in this direction of this new world we're living in, and I want to dig maybe just a little bit deeper for you and give you some idea what we are working on in order to get after it. But let me state up front, this is not my problem. This is our problem. This is an all of Air Force effort, and so I'm very sincere in thanking you for bringing me out today and having an opportunity in front of a very large audience to get the word out, if you will. It was a couple of days ago, last week, that we had a 3-star summit, and the chief and the vice chief were with us, and they kicked that session off with a really interesting discussion led by our new vice chief of staff, General Dave Goldfein. And it really was kind of, where are we as an Air Force, and where are we headed? And of course, if you don't know where you are, you definitely don't know where you're going. And so General Goldfein made a great case for, we've been an Air Force at war for 20 plus years, and he talked in terms of strategic shifts. And it is not a far stretch to kind of understand that we've been in a CT fight, and we've been leading this fight, and we've been an Air Force at war for all of that time, and we have gotten ourselves out of balance. And sometimes we don't stop and think about it, but we've invested a lot in the global vigilance part of our Air Force, and the bill payer has been the global power of our Air Force. And he makes the case that, just using sort of the standard bar charts, so vigilance is up here, power is down here, we're kind of paying the bills with our ability to do global strike. And he holds in the middle global reach, but that is a discussion primarily of platforms. So the first point I would like to make is that it takes an appreciation for somebody who knows how your work gets done and what it takes to do global reach, to understand that while the platforms may have held steady, which is a good thing, much of what we're doing is dependent on your ability to overcome obstacles, to be innovative in your efforts, and to really do some tremendous work for us across the global enterprise. And it really is our strategic advantage in a way, in that, and everybody's touched upon this as well, is that this new world we're living in, which I'll talk about, is something that we're well trained and ready to do. We are an innovative force, we are a technology force, and the United States Air Force in this space today is leading the way. So we have reason to be optimistic, we have reason to be confident, and so this is not a Debbie Downer discussion in any way. It's a really positive discussion, but we still have to recognize the challenges in front of us. So let me talk about who we are for just a minute, because I want to give you a personal perspective. When the secretary kicked off the symposium a couple days ago, and when the chief spoke to us, and certainly in all that General McDew had to talk about yesterday, fundamentally, at the end of the day, it's about our people. And I want to give you a perspective because it's a little different, but I feel like it personalizes. I have had the opportunity throughout my career to be affiliated with just about every aspect of the globability, the rapid global mobility, the global reach mission. Whether it's airlift or tankers or global reach laydown in our EMTF and the CRGs and what they do, and then most recently with the Expeditionary Center. And so have a really good appreciation when you just flip through the paper or listen to the news, what it took to do what we did. And have always had great pride in our efforts because we're kind of the silent warrior back there making it happen. And you should be very proud, as many of us are on the air staff, and the chief said it better than anybody in terms of we just take it for granted, and that's a badge of honor. But let me give you just a slightly different perspective, because the assignment before the one I'm in, I was deployed to Baghdad. And as Mosul fell and things were not looking good and the security was a complete breakdown, and many people don't realize this, but the Iraqi army just melted away. 90,000 troops disappeared overnight, and Mosul fell to ISIS. And so this was, a pretty difficult situation and potentially catastrophic for the people who were assigned over there working at the embassy. And, just as a testimonial to some of the extraordinary work that took place, again, from the people in this room, when you're on the receiving end, it's a different perspective. I have always taken great pride as a commander to what we're doing, but when you're there counting on it, it makes a huge difference. And some of the extraordinary work that was done, I know that, the example I would use Foreign military sales programs to sell weapons and equipment typically take months and months in the making. To give you some idea of the gravity of the situation, in a 24-hour period, we signed a $250 million foreign military sales case where I stepped out to the El-Kindi divide right outside the embassy, got the Minister of Defense of the Iraqi government to sign off on a $250 million case, and within 24 hours, C-17s were on the ramp, dropping off ammunition and Hellfire missiles. Really extraordinary. And I couldn't tell you, I can't capture the feeling that you get when you're at the embassy and the 52 Marine FAST team shows up and another 300 out at the airport, when you don't count on the security from the host nation, you have to provide for yourself. And when the phone calls came in from the 5th Fleet commander telling us that he was sailing north in the Gulf, and when the CENTCOM command team called and said, we're at the ready, and when the guys down in Ali al-Salim had the engines running and they were ready to respond, that's when you feel pretty good about what you do, because you're there to pull people out of dangerous situations. So in a very personal way, thank you. That's something that hasn't changed, the people that we are. I'd like to also submit that what we do is not all that different. It is changing, and I'm going to talk about that, but you know, our core missions, what provides that global vigilance, global reach, and global power, has not changed, and instead is morphing or is transitioning over time. If you look into our, what does the Air Force of 2035 look for, which has just been published, the Future Operating Concept, it will tell you that command and control becomes multi-domain command and control. It'll tell you that air and space superiority becomes adaptive domain control as a concept. And global integrated ISR, actually the only core mission that doesn't change in that 20-year period because you're doing it so well and they didn't see the need to change, is rapid global mobility. And of course, it will become global precision strike. So what we do doesn't change, but the world in which we live has changed tremendously. And I think that's what I would offer as we continue to put the context around where are we as an Air Force, that while we were getting out of balance because we were doing what the nation was asking for, we were at the same time living in a world that was completely and totally changing around us. It's called the information age. And so what does that mean to us? I mean, if you just take a snapshot in time today, 300 exabytes. And for those who don't know what an exabyte is, including me, we've dumbed it down a little bit, 300 billion bytes. Okay, what does that mean? That means if every person in the world spent all of their time either reading, watching, or listening to those bytes, they would spend every second of every day for 87 years to get through it. So it's a big amount of data. We try, in the business I'm in, we try to give concepts and to give some idea of scale. Let me give you another, what I think is a great example of where we are in today's Air Force and really in today's United States military and the scope of the change required to be effective in the information age. General McDough mentioned Blockbuster, and that's a great example. This is just one other example, and there are many of them. In 2002, we envisioned the requirement to outfit our soldiers in the field and the people on the ground in Afghanistan with a joint tactical receive and send radio, and called the JITRs. And the JITRs program invested $6 billion in development and design of the JITRs. And when we were supposed to deliver it in 2006, when we had to extend it because it wasn't ready to deliver, and in 2009, we canceled that program. We could look back to what we were supposed to deliver 3 years earlier, and it would have been a unit cost of $397,000 a radio. Not good. We're working on it. We're making changes. At the same time, in 2005, we envisioned the iPhone. $150 million in R&D. Delivered in 2007, improved in 2008, 2009, 2011, 2014, and most recently with the 6th iteration in 2015. Price per copy, $299. That's the scope of the problem. And again, I'm optimistic. Remember, I stated that I'm optimistic. We can do this. We're the technology force, we're the innovation force. So if you would go to the next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about data and sort of, again, scoping the problem. YouTube uploads 300 hours of video every minute of every day. Uber, 700 rides every minute of every day. 177,000 hours of video streaming on Netflix every minute of every day. I'll skip Airbnb because I'll come back to that, but Twitter is about 350,000 tweets, and Facebook is 4.1 million likes every minute of every day. The reason I bring this up, because the problem is growing, and it's growing rapidly, and in fact, it's increasing exponentially. So we're at the very, very nascent part of the curve. And so if we don't get serious about changing, it will outpace us. Uber is the largest cab company in the world, only they don't own any taxis. Facebook is the largest content company in the world, and they don't own any content. Airbnb is the largest hotel chain in the world. 50,000 users. I think it's 57,000 cities in 150 countries. It's worldwide. And they don't own any hotels. So this should give us pause. This is about information, and it's really based on one single point of failure: trust. If we don't trust Airbnb, they go out of business. And so, I present it as the world we're living in, and we have to recognize it and start to look in terms of what are the applications for us. Now, you might ask a very practical question, and it's something that we work on. What do we do with all that data? It's whether it starts on your computer or an external hard drive, or it's someplace in a data center, or concepts we're working to bring in this volume of data and move into the cloud. All of these things are working. We're doing projects especially related to data center consolidation. It's a way to protect that data and to ensure that we know we have accountability on our applications, and also just a way to get after this trust. I mean, at the end of the day, if we can't trust the veracity of the data, if we can't correlate that data in some way to turn it into usable information, if we can't honestly say that information puts us at a strategic advantage over the enemy because we're inside of their decision cycle with knowledge, and of course knowledge is only knowledge, and it takes the commander's intent, and the commander in the loop is what takes best advantage of that knowledge, well, then we really are in a critical deficit situation. And so what we're working on, in addition to these kind of big things, finding efficiencies by moving to the cloud, is also at the same time trying to protect that data. And protecting the data, comes in all shapes and sizes, and we're using lots of different technologies, but ultimately it's protecting the applications and securing the data itself. And I believe, and another reason I'm very optimistic about this, is I think that the technologies are out there, and at the end of the day, better technologies are going to help us through. So there are opportunities, there's no doubt about it. I mean, Google anything you want, get an instant answer. I drove to Reagan the other day, and I was able to identify all the potholes on the way to Reagan by using Waze. And, you knew where the cops were, you knew where the lights were and everything else. You can take a different way around. So it's fantastic, and nobody's denying that. But we should always be thinking, what are we asking for here? What are the risks and the vulnerabilities that we take on with that? Global vigilance, as I said, we've paid well into that account, and we're an amazing Air Force today because of it. It really gives us our ability to hold an enemy at risk anywhere, at any quarter of the world, at any time. And it's amazing. Our weapon systems, arguably the F-35 is truly a sensor. It's not a fifth-gen aircraft until you make the connections of all the networks and the capabilities. Today, in not too distant past, you had an aviate and navigate mantra. Now it's aviate, assimilate, disseminate, and you become part of a much larger fifth-gen network. But it's not fifth-gen until we do the hard work of leveraging those technologies. And at the same time, we must realize that we open ourselves to vulnerabilities. And of course, Internet of Things is another one. And who can even guess when you've got 50 billion different devices hooked up to the Internet in 2020 is what's forecast. What does that mean to us, really? We're just beginning to learn. Of course, you've read, like I have, all of the various vulnerabilities that are out there. Who has received their OPM notification that you've been hacked? Everybody, right? And so, the enemy is in our networks, and anybody who tells you that we're going to try to harden our way out of this and protect ourselves and bake it in such that we don't have a problem anymore, that's not possible. And so we have to deal with the world we're living in. And, I could give you example after example, and the problem increasingly becomes who's thinking more about this and who's staying ahead of the enemy. As I said, it's kind of the knowledge at the end of the day that keeps bad things from happening, and that's, eventually where we're trying to take the Air Force. So, it starts with having a plan. How are you going to, I mentioned that future operating concept, and it's really premised on one thing, and that is operational agility. And our role today within all of the functionals on the air staff, and certainly I'm a part of those conversations, and my team is, it's to start to build out a future that can allow that operational agility in a way that we can continue to be a dominant Air Force in the information age. It starts with having a plan. And fortunately, our Air Force has the best strategy and the best set of strategy documents that make great sense that I believe we've ever had. This chief has paid great attention to it, and General Holmes in the A5 and his team have built out a very comprehensive strategy for us, from which cascades out other documents and leads to a future operating concept that my organization, with an information dominance flight plan, is very much nested in. And so it gives you clear goals, objectives, initiatives, time-phased in a way that you get after them, and it is the direction we're going. Nobody gets to have a conversation with the vice chief or the chief today, or the secretary and the under for that matter, if you can't start the conversation with how does this apply to the Air Force strategy. And that's a good thing for our Air Force. We're doing a ton of work for the Air Force in the area of moving our IT enterprise forward. And what's happening at a strategic level is we're collapsing away from single service security architectures to joint. And we're very much a major partner in that effort. And what I'm talking about for those who don't do this every day, you hear about the Air Force Gateway and the Air Force Network. There are 16 ways and 16 ways in and 16 ways out of these gateways. And we've got good experience as a service. And so in a way, we're leading the joint community in order to bring them up to where we've been. When OPM happened, we certainly could have been just as much a victim, but because we're architected the way we are, we have people on our networks, and we're defending our networks in depth, the Air Force was not exploited or even penetrated. It wasn't for lack of trying. It's because we saw this coming and we're well positioned. And now we're trying to lead the joint community to a point where we have single security architecture for the entire DoD. In terms of the workforce, there's a tremendous amount of work taking place in order to shape today's communication squadron and kind of offload the work that can be done by commercial entities, dropping in networks, sustaining your networks, deliver an email to your desktop and things of that nature, where you can buy these things commercially as a service, and repurposing the airmen that we have doing that work today to this construct called mission assurance. And it's pretty simple. It's those 5 core missions today and into the future that we must be able to operate in and be successful in order to win the next fight of the future. And that notion of kind of constraining ourselves to the core missions as opposed to trying to solve world hunger really is what the Air Force does. It's what we deliver the nation. And so we're shaping this cyberspace squadron of the future to be a part of, not exclusively all calm people and cyber warriors doing it, but a whole of Air Force approach to understanding, to having the situational awareness of what's on your network, what's in your weapon systems, and where are those vulnerabilities, and being able at the end of the day to go to the commander and tell them, this is where we have risk, this is how we fight, this is how we can work through a cyber-contested environment. So lots of work taking place there. We are serious in the Air Force about cybersecurity. And I'm very happy to report that an initiative started some number of months ago now, probably 6 to 8 months ago, standing up a cybersecurity task force, has really borne a lot of fruit. Most importantly, not in terms of the deliverables, and there have been some at the enterprise level where we're making important fixes to known vulnerabilities, but far more important is to have elevated the conversation. You heard from General McDough yesterday and from others that cybersecurity is the #1 concern that he has. And I would say that increasingly that's true, and that's the conversation we're having, and I'm quite sure it's going to be a discussion at Corona next week. I know that in the previous Corona I had the opportunity to facilitate a discussion on cyber, and it was long overdue. And so now our leadership are making some tough choices, setting priorities, and getting after cybersecurity in a very meaningful way. It's network security for sure. We're leading the Air Force. We're leading the military in that way. When you want to know how to do this, go to 24th Air Force. And the work that Ed Wilson joined with the 25th there, right at San Antonio, they're doing great work. We're taking a serious effort forward on weapons platform security, where there are legacy, as you know more than anybody, legacy systems that have these vulnerabilities, and we weren't thinking about it back then, but we got to figure it out now. And so LCMC, the Lifecycle Management Center under John Thompson, and AFMC writ large are working this problem. And then, of course, I mentioned a lot of work being done on securing our data and making sense of that at the enterprise level. So a lot of good work coming out of the task force. And finally, a third sort of thread of our flight plan and the effort that we're undertaking within my portfolio is all of the efficiencies, because when you get to these high-level discussions and you're in a fixed budget situation, you have to have a way to pay for it. And so some of the decisions we're making today to get to the cloud, where literally it cost us pennies on the dollar, something that may be costing us, $100, whatever the measurement is today, can be done for pennies. But you got to get there. And, so we're working as hard as we can to take advantage of today's technologies, whether it's data center consolidation efforts where the problem just keeps growing. When I got to the job a year ago, I said, how many data centers does the United States Air Force have? Sir, we stopped counting at 440. So we took a serious effort, we put a structure in place, and we're going after with a lot of good help from all the MAGCOMs. And we've so far closed 80, but identified that we have 1,435. And we're guessing that we may have up to 5,000. What costs the Air Force after jet fuel? What's the highest cost for our Air Force in terms of energy? It's our data centers. And so there are hundreds of millions, maybe billions of dollars available to us if we do this right. And we can pay for ourselves. but it takes money to make money, and that's the challenge that we're going after. And then finally, on the mobility side of things, we're trying to develop a strategy for data management and for mobility devices so that you're getting the right information at the right time in the right place, and a lot of good work taking place there. And we can talk more about this in the Q&A. So the way that we're going about it, it's kind of the same that industry would use, which is sort of think really big, think enterprise, start really small, because that's all you can afford, and then scale it fast if it makes sense. And so, you know, anybody who's kind of reading the current literature on how to survive in this information rapidly changing world is start small, and if you're going to fail really fast because it's really cheap. Don't commit the entire enterprise to a way of doing things and find out when you get to your jitters radio in 2009 that it was a bad idea. And that is a cultural mindset change that has got to take place. I have about 12 or 13 different pathfinders, and by that I mean, you know, sort of proof of concepts ongoing. And they run the gamut, whether you're trying to protect access with an enterprise level security, identity management type of setup so that we know who we are and we can avoid the insider threat as well as keep our network safe. Or if you're looking at things like enterprise as a service and sort of collaboration tools that can be provided commercially. Something that I think has the greatest potential for the Air Force is taking that data center and making it scalable and putting it on a power substation because the energy's right there and you eliminate the cybersecurity threat at the same time. And you can get 9 nines of reliability, and that means nothing to me, just like it means nothing to most of you. It just means that we can assure our mission going forward, but it takes a leap of faith to get there and to go after these types of new technologies. And, you know, it's hard rowing, but the Air Force is committed to moving in that direction. And then how does this affect you? Well, you know better than I do the Rapid Global Mobility mission. As I said, all of the piece parts and the work that it takes to do your global mission. I know you know this, but it's worth restating. IT is ubiquitous in all of that. Every part of you cannot name something that you do that doesn't tie back very rapidly to an IT, whether it's the weapon system that you're in, or the networks that you use, the command and control out of TACC, and I'm stating the obvious, but let's even bring it back a little bit further. How about to Building 1575 at Scott, where, you know, the preponderance of the global transportation network sits on servers. And so a determined enemy who knows what they're doing, they take out the chiller, and maybe the redundant chiller at the same time, just for good measure. And we've had these types of, sort of vulnerabilities out there, and we've known they've been there, but it's all been in the area of what if. But we got to get after them. And I'm thankful to say that this command and this leadership team on the front row understands that, and they're going to partner with us to help develop those proofs of concept so we can get after some real challenges for us in your ability in the future to do the mission. So while rapid global mobility doesn't change, the world around you has changed, and you have to address that. I stated for impact because I think the biggest thing that you can take away from this discussion is this whole notion of mission assurance. We're not going to harden our way out of it. We're going to have to work together to get a better understanding of what constitutes that mission. How does it work? It doesn't happen magically, as you know, but it's the next level of detail and the one after that that gets you into understanding how that mission comes together. And it's actually a mission threat analysis from beginning to end. And then everybody, all hands on deck trying to solve it, whether you're talking the work that takes place in your global command and control or your airlift, your air refueling, your aeromatic, it doesn't matter. It's all tied to IT. Next. And so sort of my get off the stage slide here. And again, I'm happy to take any questions you might have. When you talk about the requirement for operational agility and the world we're living in now and going to increasingly live into the future, I would submit to you that we have got to leverage our people and their ability to innovate and to be creative. We got to push decision-making down to the lowest level. We got to do it fast. We've got to talk amongst each other, and that's, in this case, that's what I mean by networking, and being collaborative. This is not an A6 problem. It's all of our problem. Working together to solve big, complex problems like our forefathers have in other issues. I think the chief did a great job telling you how air refueling started. Actually, this is probably easier than getting out on the wing of a biplane and climbing up and putting fuel in. So we shouldn't, step back from the challenge that's in front of us. And I'm absolutely 100% convinced that we can do it if we start to think a little bit different about the world we live in. So with that, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to share with you some of what's going on up at the Air Staff in my area, and would be happy to entertain any questions you might have for me.
Hey, good morning, Lieutenant General Bender. Thank you very much for coming to talk to us today. I'm Major Jeff Peterson from AMC A1KO. And my question is in regard to information security. So with OPM, and as more of that data kind of came out as far as what went down there, one of the questions that kept popping into my mind was, why is my security application from more than 10 years ago online in a database that was known to have questionable defensive security? So in our rush to put devices online, information online, and our ability to protect that or maybe not protect that information, are we moving too fast in putting that stuff online without the ability to protect it? Or is there something more that could be done to prevent something like that from happening in the future?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Good, a fair question, and one that I hear very often. And, I think that generally speaking, we're not rushing at all. We need to move a whole lot faster than we are. There's a methodical approach being taken in terms of level of data that we're going to even allow to get outside of, say, a private enclave of sorts. The OPM challenge and all that has led to is just another indication of the need to think differently. Had we thought about it and had we invested appropriately, we could have protected that information. We'll do that now. At last count, I think I heard, rough number, $570 million to recover from the OPM exploitation, and the number is going to go up. And at the end of the day, if you look a little bit back in history, it used to be, I forget the name of the organization, but it was within the DOD. We did that. We contracted it out to OPM and gave it to them. Now the number one proposal coming back to Congress, how are we going to solve this? Bring it back to DOD. And, there will be further investment required in order to protect that. But to your larger question in terms, are we going too fast? As I said, we're trying to take best advantage of a lot of technology that can help us in the area of situational awareness, what's on our networks, who's trying to get after it, what's transpiring, minute by minute, second by second. We're also, looking at the use of machine-to-machine automation that stops things from happening. We're using virtualization. We're using, sort of a smart approach to moving things to the cloud, as I said, so that we're, protecting the data at the same time. And there's all kinds of opportunities, but all of those take money. And my whole sort of premise of this discussion is we're 5 years, 10 years late to the fight, but there's no better time than to start now. I think we're taking a really smart approach at it and feel very confident we can get there. And so it's not a matter of rushing ahead. It's a matter of smartly proceeding as fast as we can to get there.
Right down here in the front, please. Just hang on, Bob. No, hang on, Bob.
All I can tell you is I'm not looking forward to this question because he's way smarter than me on this stuff, but okay.
Sir, thank you so much for your comments. It was really cool. But can you talk to us? You talked about the challenge. Now, from preparing our airmen, can you talk to us about your efforts? New kid comes out of high school, she's kind of smart in this, and you're going to prepare her to be this warrior that can do the, what you call it, adaptive domain dominance. talk to us about your strategy from your functional perspective to prepare that airman.
So again, this is not an Air Force problem per se, but let's focus on the airmen of the future. There is a tremendous amount of work being done across our Air Force in efforts to first find people with the aptitude for this. So, you know, we've been trying to find those with language aptitude in the DLAP test forever. We don't have a test. It's one of the things that the Cybersecurity Task Force found money for, put out there, and we now are putting an aptitude battery out to the entire Air Force. We'll get there shortly. And it's to find those who have the skills related to this. We're working mightily down in our area, down at Keesler, which is our primary training, to, you know, kind of put in all of the concepts that I talked about in terms of operationalizing this domain. We are really looking at novel ways to assess people, bringing them in from industry, making a better use of our Guard and Reserve who do this for, you know, for their regular jobs, and just bring them in when we can get them. Very liberal exchange rules. So, you know, some of this comes down to the programmatics. Sam Cox, who recently left, could tell you there's been a tremendous amount of effort led at the DoD level for Force of the Future initiatives. Much of that is focused on our cyber career field and recognizing, you know, to the heart of General Allardyce's question, the need to do things different. I meet people out at trade shows all the time, young kids either in high school or freshly out of high school who are just tinkerers. They operate out of the basement and they want to come and do what we do. And we probably don't have to pay them a whole lot. What our trade stock is really cool problems and really important problems. We're never going to pay them enough, but there are people who want to do that. We have to find a way to get away from the strictures of bringing them in. My own personal thought is probably into our civilian workforce in some type of way, but if we can do it in terms of, you know, blue suiters, we would do that. So there are a whole range of sort of Force of the Future initiatives. But I think it goes bigger than that. I said, if we're going to demonstrate operational agility as the Air Force 20 years from now requires, then it means looking at the attributes of, you know, speed and flexibility and the ability to coordinate and share information and some of the other attributes that go into that. And at the end of the day, it's how are we going to operate? What are we going to do to change our mindset? How are we going to think differently, as my last slide said? And that requires a cultural change. And, you know, I hope that everybody today realizes that this is not a question of if, but it's when. We will come around to the cultural change. I suggest that it was time to start 5 years ago, and there's no time like now to get started with it. And some of the things we're doing internally, and I'm having a discussion with the chief and the vice chief trying to demonstrate the ability to innovate at our level and let that kind of propagate out. And those are types of things that are just change our work management structure in a way that can help this problem. Another one is, you know, I was with Johns Hopkins a couple of days ago, Dice, trying to discuss in this space, we've got to completely and totally change how we define requirements. And we need to use industry as a full partner in that effort because it's too hard, we don't have the subject matter expertise, and it's out of step with the environment we're living in. By the time we get to it, it's already OBE, overcome by events. And so lots of change required. Again, I'm very optimistic that we're the service that can lead this, and we should. And I think that we have our leadership at the entire level of the Air Force, the 4-star level, including our chief and our secretary, who are going to demand that of us. So get ready, strap it on, and I think we can do it. I hope that gets at it a little bit.
Over here on the right. Yes, ma'am.
General, thank you for speaking to us. Caroline Evernham, 315th Ops Group Commander, Joint Base Charleston. I'm over here in the aisle.
Okay, hi.
Yeah, we have a lot of amazing systems, but the systems that I need to do my job every day don't work. So DEEMS, e-finance, AFMS 2, VPC, they don't do what I need them to do every minute of every day. And so I'm curious as to whether you're aware of that and if there's something being done to fix those for us.
Yes. I am aware of it. And yes, help is on the way. I don't want to make light of the question. I mean, we for too long have, you know, and I told this to our cyber symposium the other day, we have a credibility gap. And the first order of business within this community is getting our IT house in order. And we have, for the first time that I know of, we have put this whole concept of a single security architecture and joint comms going forward, which is the backbone for everything. It's the systems that you talk about. It's how those applications connect and can stay connected and can move our mission. For the first time I'm aware of, we're actually a program of record, which doesn't, it's sort of bureaucratic language, but those who have dealt in our Pentagon understand that IT has never been a program of record. And so you're always bellying up at the end of the year for unfundeds, and everybody's got a bright idea on how to do this, and they're cobbling it together, and it ends up over many years of a proliferation of IT all over the place. Works for some, doesn't work at all for others. And frankly, that's what we're trying to do. As I said, take an enterprise view and get after fixes that lead our Air Force forward in this space in a way that is manageable and affordable. And so the eaches, in terms of the programs, there is a plan. And we're working it extremely hard to work with each of the mission areas. In that case, most of what you described are called business mission areas, and I sit side by side with our business leaders within the Air Staff, and we push them into the IT governance process, and out the other end comes deliverable, affordable systems. And if fixes are required in the short term, we make a risk decision. Can we afford that to kind of put good money after bad, or do we scrap that, or do we borrow from another service who has a better system? And so all of these discussions take place, but this is a big organization and it takes time.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have time for one more question on, on my left in the middle back.
Sir, thank you very much. Major Schulin, Charleston Air Force Base. I've heard you mention a couple of times about how it seems like services are fighting each other. A lot of things are happening in parallel, and maybe we borrow something from a different service, and you're talking about unity of effort. Can you explain why potentially removing cyber, creating its own possibly sister service, taking it all out and making one unity of command as opposed to having each service with its own cyber unit, and how that wouldn't be a better solution?
I mean, I can take a stab at that. I think it's a good question, and it's the ongoing dialogue. The whole notion of where are we going at cyber has been in and out of the tank with the Joint Chiefs probably 5, 6, 7, 8 times, and a couple more to come, because it's, you know, you're hitting on the, you know, a challenging discussion. How do we do force presentation in a world in which there is no more coming? We have to live within our means. The combatant commands have an insatiable appetite for protecting and defending their networks and their ability to get the mission done. The Air Force still hasn't today really invested in a cyber force for organic purposes. We're doing it on the, you know, sort of on the perimeter. You're doing it for yourselves because we haven't, as a service, defined what requirements are out there. And we can't have it both ways. We can't say that this demand signal for the cyber mission force to support cyber command is, you know, is sort of this black hole where we train and we provide and we experience, and then we lose people in Cyber Command if we don't do the hard work to define our own requirements. And the construct for that is mission assurance, whether it's our networks, our weapons systems, or the entire mission thread required. So we have to, A, get around defining our own requirements and then building out an organic capability to do that. To your question, would it be better just to go all in joint? I would be pretty concerned about going in that path. I think that we do have to be joint, we fight joint, we have to act joint, and Cyber Command in that regard has been very, very effective. In many ways, much of the provisioning that we take and the work that's being done, both on the very pointy end of this space and much in the defense, is taking place in the joint community. And so the support that we get in certain mission sets may be provided by Army Cyber Command. Much of what we deliver, out of 24th Air Force in this area is joint in nature. And so I think that what we're finding as time goes on is that there is a certain service culture that applies. And that we, as the United States Air Force, to assure our 5 core missions, we absolutely have to have an Air Force perspective on what we're doing in this domain. And so I don't want to offload that to any other service and be dependent on them. I think we should get better about working together, and absolutely essential. I mean, in my job, I have a tremendous rapport and a daily rapport with all of the other service CIOs. We all recognize we cannot do it alone. We spend a lot of time together and we work together to try to fix joint problems. But I think that we're also unified in our position that each service has requirements unique to their service, and so we're working those at the same time. I hope that answers the question.